Hi, everyone. All right. I am the last 5 minutes of KubeCon India, which is really sad. I was disappointed when they came and got me to come downstairs because I've been up on the 4th floor all day having just some of the most amazing conversations with so many people who are kind of in every single level of adoption of Kubernetes right now. People who are literally here because they're trying to learn what it is, people who have been using it for 4 years and have incredibly, incredible technical questions, and everything in between. But in the 5 minutes I have with you, I thought to myself, like, what would be a good way to close out the first, CNCF event here in India? And I thought I'd try to just imagine, where we're going to be. Because I was at the very first KubeCon in San Francisco 4 years ago. And so, there was 100 people, maybe 300 people, I think. But it was dramatically smaller than this. And so I'm thinking, like, how big is the KubeCon India 2025 going to be? And there's kind of two directions these things go when they're really popular projects. They either continue to expand and expand and expand, or the bubble bursts and people say, like, oh, that was great, but we kind of moved on to the next cool new technology. And I'm pretty convinced that we're going to be at a KubeCon India that's 3 days with 20,000 people using Kubernetes in just about every conceivable way in 2025 when we're back here in Bangalore. And the reasons are, Kubernetes, when it first came out, we really saw this idea of Kubernetes as something that would orchestrate Kubernetes. Oh, yeah. What am I doing wrong? Couldn't hear me? Now you can hear me? Was everything before that lost? It was so good. It was the best I've ever done. I'm so crushed. All right, so now you can hear me at least. I thought it sounded really loud. So the idea of where we're going to be, I'm pretty convinced that by 2025, Kubernetes will actually be quite ubiquitous, and that this thing we started as a way to manage clusters of Docker containers will now be effectively the core way we run applications on just about every kind of infrastructure that an organization deals with. Brad Linder did a great case study for the CNCF earlier this year, and he talked about Sling, one of the biggest media companies in the US, they're part of Dish, and he talked about how so many of the applications they were writing right now were basically impossible without the orchestration capabilities that cloud-native frameworks and Kubernetes have delivered to them over the last few years. And his quote here is, we couldn't have done these things. There's things that were not possible. And the reason for this is that when we look at an application now, we talked about this move to microservices, and I think everyone assumes that's important in the data center, that we're going to be using componentized applications. But it actually turns out that almost everywhere we run software, we benefit from this new architecture of lots and lots of interchangeable components, loosely coupled, that can be updated independently, and which require a certain amount of orchestration. And this piece, this is why all of a sudden the idea of Kubernetes, not just in the data center, but out on the edge or in IoT devices, starts to make a lot of sense. If I'm pulling a lot of data from IoT components and I need to do local analytics, I need things like Kafka and Spark and MongoDB, etc. And so more complex applications are requiring more complex orchestration in all sorts of places that we wouldn't have previously thought of it. So I think we're heading to an era of effectively organizations dealing with software everywhere using Kubernetes and building out platforms to deliver Kubernetes management, Kubernetes-as-a-Service on just about every kind of infrastructure that an organization deals with, whether that's different clouds, different data centers. It's out on the edge. It's in base stations, in factories, in base stations, in oil wells, in wind farms, in retail stores. We're seeing this now, and what we're seeing is not only the spread of Kubernetes, but sort of the role of IT in managing Kubernetes turning into a formal thing, where the central organizational structure is seeing Kubernetes as a way to define things like policy and access one time, apply them everywhere, and allow the teams trying to innovate to get access to that innovation material wherever it is they need to run their workload. So when I look forward, that's what I'm imagining. I think it's we're kind of right in the beginnings of that phase. We're kind of, when you think about, I've been working on these container projects for 4 years now, and what I would say is, most of the time, we're all kind of still trying to just build out your Kubernetes infrastructure. We're trying to put together the pieces of the stack that we need to deliver all this. And I think that remains, for a lot of teams, a pretty fun, exciting part of the journey to Kubernetes is building up your first implementation, picking how you're going to, solve networking and choosing different storage models and figuring out which cloud you're going to run things in, how you're going to do security and what you want to do for networking and how it's going to plug into CI. And this is, a big part of the journey of learning about Kubernetes is building out these first clusters, and often they're like pockmark the organization. Smart teams pick them up, they put them in different places, they start using it, and it spreads like the measles. People start using it, they share their experience, they have big success, and they want to keep moving. But it tends to scale, and pretty quickly that grows, and teams begin to enter what we think of as kind of phase 2, Kubernetes as a service with, more and more clusters running in different places. These great new cloud services like GKE and EKS and AKS, and Ali Cloud, and there's Kubernetes service and Oracle Kubernetes. You can now get Kubernetes anywhere, and you can get all these clusters. You have the beginnings of centralized policy management, the beginnings of applications that are designed from the beginning to span clusters, the beginnings of storage services. You can meet people like OpenEBS and Portworx and people that are innovating on how to build storage layers that are cloud independent and can effectively run across multiple clusters in multiple environments. Networking layers that can span clusters, the concepts of service meshes that can run across all of your Kubernetes infrastructure. All this is happening. And so I think for most people that are on the leading edge of Kubernetes, kind of in this stage right now. They're beginning to imagine Kubernetes as an enterprise service that is going to really, transform the way people get to IT. And this is where a lot of the conversations are. When I'm talking to people, they're saying things like, well, should we be doing clusters as a service? Should we be giving Kubernetes clusters to every team that needs it? Or namespace as a service where we share big clusters? Or, what does that look like? I think inevitably we're going to be pushed more and more towards heterogeneous clusters running in all sorts of different places. And, the idea of this, is that we're going to get to the point where Kubernetes is really powering the edge. There's projects like KubeEdge and K3S that we launched recently. There's just so many things that are pushing Kubernetes to shrink its size, to run on ARM, to exist in unexpected places, that we're going to see the need to run not tens of clusters or even hundreds of clusters, but thousands of clusters and potentially tens of thousands of clusters. We've seen projects where retailers have Kubernetes clusters in every single store or every single fast food chain or every single coffee shop. And people are looking at Kubernetes to run, all over the cellular networks, all over the, things like communication networks. And you think of what's going on at places like Comcast and AT&T, they're just investing enormously in Kubernetes as a core enabling technology in the next generation of communications and internet and certainly entertainment. And so, I think things that we're seeing excitement around are how do we start to do things like fleet management for not tens but thousands of clusters? How do we solve all of the challenge of patching, not just of Kubernetes, but the operating system and everything? How do we auto-update these applications? How do we tell the difference between dozens of clusters and thousands of clusters that need to be updated? So phase 3 for me is kind of Kubernetes everywhere. And I still think we're a few years away from this, but it's being innovated on right now. If you're looking for areas to get into that are just at the beginning of, I think there's just tons of projects that are looking at solving these problems, and it's a really exciting time. So what I'll leave you with in my last minute or so is just, as you guys leave here today and you head back to your organizations, where are we right now is you really need to be thinking about building an enterprise-wide Kubernetes strategy. You need to be thinking about how your organization is going to leverage this technology, the potential it's unlocking to transform your business, because there is no business that's not going to be affected by the ability to easily and reliably deploy complex applications anywhere. It just changes everything. It opens up so much potential of things like machine learning and AI to actually impact your business processes, to provide better customer experiences. So start by looking at who's using Kubernetes and where they're using it today. Look into kind of some questions of centralizing your operations and thinking about who should be responsible for these services. There's plenty of places, shared services, centralized DevOps teams, innovation teams, IT, who can own this, but don't be afraid to generate some level of responsibility for designing this strategy. Don't ignore security and compliance. This is the time to start looking at it. There are amazing companies doing amazing things to help you ensure that you can do all this while really protecting your organization and your assets. And certainly dive into the training. Now is the time to go. There's so many great things. The CNCF online training is amazing. If you are not going to this, if you haven't been to it, go to it. If you personally have the opportunity to get certified as a Kubernetes admin, go now, do this. It is worth its weight in gold. I will hire you. Everyone will hire you. There's so much demand for certified Kubernetes admin. So get involved, jump in. Thank you so much for coming out today and supporting CNCF, Kubernetes, everything we're doing. It is an absolute pleasure to be here for the first Kubernetes Day in India. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.